If you've ever listened to Edmonton radio, then likely you've heard the voice you're about to see right now. Doesn't make any sense.
Sure does. The voice you're about to see?
Okay.
Sure does.
If you've ever listened to Edmonton radio, you'll recognize the voice you're about to see right now, and that's Bob Layton from 630 CHED. He's also a fixture on Global TV, and over the course of the last 40 years or so, he's been our morning newsreader. He also does editorials, and he's a news director, and all of those could be a full-time job, but in spite of that, Bob continues to churn out amazing editorials and win all kinds of awards. And my question for you, Mr. Layton, how do you keep up that creative energy? How do you continue to turn out editorial after editorial?
Well, basically, I'm feeding off the energy of the audience, and that's where all the ideas come from. I get a lot of emails, I get a lot of phone calls, I do a lot of public speaking, and people come up and talk to me about things. If I'm asked to speak for an hour, I'll only speak for 45 minutes, and then I'll open up to questions from the audience, and that's where a lot more ideas come from, and comments from the audience. We've got the brightest audience in the world. They come up with the most clever observations I've ever heard.
And I appreciate the fact that you're open enough to take ideas from the audience, but I think you're being a little bit generous to them too. Even if they do give you ideas, you have to sit down and craft editorials. When you sit down, what's the first thing that you think of? What's your starting point for creating an editorial?
The starting point has to be, who cares? Who cares about this? Because if it's something that not many people care about, there's not much point in doing it. It's got to be about something that affects a lot of people. And you can tell when you're out in public, when somebody mentions something, if everyone else applauds, you know that's your editorial. You have to remember I get here at 3 o'clock in the morning, so I'm a little dopey, you know, I'm maybe a little bit punch drunk, I don't know, and I have the idea, I know what I want to do, and I try to come up with the closing line first. In my mind, when I see a great movie and it's got a great finish, I think, they probably came up with the great finish first and then worked it out so they could get there. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's basically how I do it. I come up with the ending and then see if we've got enough legitimate material to take us to that spot.
Now sometimes you stray a little bit and you do something funny like a tribute to Dr. Seuss, and you go away from sort of the hard news aspect and have some fun with it. How do you decide which ones are a good candidate for that?
Well, it depends, I guess, on the level of creativity that particular morning. I did a rap editorial, I sang an editorial, I used a puppet and did a ventriloquist editorial, and you're always looking for something new, something different, so that it's not just, it doesn't appear just like angry man sitting at desk.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for something else, you know, to dress it up a little bit.
One of the most memorable editorials you ever did for me was the one about the man who lost his son in the river.
Oh, yes.
And he tied a rope, he would refuse to give up, and he searched for and you did it in a poem.
I did.
And the line when he said the river gave up the body.
Yes.
It was an emotional bit. Did you ever worry that putting it in a poem format might, I don't know, take away from some of the seriousness of the story?
Yes, and I did, and I struggled over that because it was early in the morning, and I had written this poem, and then I was going to just scrap it, and then I thought, boy, somebody might think I'm making fun or I'm treating it too light and all the rest of it. How can I do that? And it came to me, put some music behind it. So I found the right music, and that was how that one came to be.
Yeah, it came across in the end as more of an epic presentation, and I think you're right, the music was a great stroke of genius there, because it turned everything into something just incredibly memorable. And
the people, the family, felt that way too. They came and asked for several copies. It was played at the funeral, and it just sort of, it was something that told the story, which is what I like to do more than anything.
Do you think there's enough storytelling in news these days?
Well, in in our newsroom, we strive for that. I don't want to get too technical, but there's two ways of writing news. One is the journalistic, and one is the narrative. And I prefer the narrative because you get to tell the story from the beginning to the end. For example, you'll hear on probably any other station in town, a man died last night when his snowmobile hit a barbed wire fence. I would never do that. My story would be, it was about 11 o'clock last night, and a fellow had been working on his snowmobile and thought, what a nice night. It's moonlit, there's snow on the hills, and up he went and down the hills and around and past the trees. He was having a wonderful time. But in the moonlight, he could not see that barbed wire fence. He will be forever 45.
Well, Bob is everything that you ever want in a media personality or radio personality. He's thoughtful, he's witty, he's engaging, he's controversial. And the one thing that Bob has, I think everybody that gets into radio, everybody that gets into media wants to be a bigger than life personality. They want to, when somebody says their name, they want people to have an immediate image of what that is and what they stand for. Almost nobody ever accomplishes that. And we're talking about very, very accomplished broadcasters. Bob Layton has accomplished that. Bob Layton is bigger than life. And when he says something on the radio, regardless of what it is, people connect with that, they react to that, they have an emotional response to that, and that's why he's as valuable as he is to us.
I'm so fortunate that we started out in this business. It was back in 1971 when I came to CHED. Jerry Forbes was the manager, and he encouraged all of those things that we learned how to do. He encouraged the storytelling. He would bring up an expert from California and sit with us and teach us how to write those stories. So I owe Jerry Forbes and those early managers that were here a lot, because they encouraged us, they helped us.
Now, you've been doing editorials for how many years?
Well, it started in 1993.
Okay, right, when 630 CHED became the news talk giant that it is now. How did you get started doing editorials?
Well, before that, we were doing what they called contemporary news. It was basically rock and roll news. It was, hey, some dummy hung a dummy from the high-level bridge. It was, take your popcorn to city council. It's going to be a circus today. It was all that kind of stuff.
And of course, the classic
murder on 97th Street. And I got to do that a couple of times a week. Not on 97th Street, but somewhere.
Wherever, yeah.
And when we switched over, and Doug Rutherford was the new general manager, and he called me into the office and he says, look, Bob, the audience is growing up. You have to grow up. You can't do murder and all that other stuff. You can't do that anymore. I said, well, then that's no fun. Maybe I'll just move on. And he said, no. He said, you're going to be the editorialist. So this was probably on a Wednesday or a Thursday. He said, I want 5 editorials on my desk for Monday morning. Let's see how you handle various things. And so I put the 5 on his desk, and he called me in and said, you're the editorialist. Now that year, my very first year doing editorials, I was lucky enough that I won the National Award for Editorials. And when they presented it to me, the MC said, there is no national award for television editorials. I guess nobody does them anymore. And I looked around the room, and there were the people from Global. They gave me a little wave like this. And so when I came down, they said, we'll talk after. And so that's how I ended up on Global.
That's a great story. And as far as the audience's reaction to losing the murder, ever have any feedback on that?
Yes, I had quite a bit of feedback. As a matter of fact, we had it was a company gathering at the Delta Hotel, and Doug Rutherford and I were standing in the hallway talking during a break, and this woman came along, and she said, hey, you're Bob Layton. I see you on TV. She says, hey, 2 things. Number 1, you can never retire. Number 2, what has happened to you? You're not what you used to be. You don't say murder anymore, and we're all waiting for it. You don't do it anymore. And I look at Doug, and he's just looking at the floor.
Well, she's right, Bob. You can never retire. Thank you for being this week's engagement.
My pleasure.
Great
Thank
talk.
you.